Welcome to the Family Brand Show. We're Chris and Melissa Smith of FamilyBrand.com, husband and wife, parents of 5, and we want to help you take back your family and to live life on your terms.
And we know being a family can feel really overwhelming. Parents tell us they feel like they're being pulled in a million different directions. It's so challenging to navigate the uncertainty and all the chaos that's happening in the world right now.
And that's why we want to bring you every single week actionable tips and strategies that you can implement in your daily life to become a better parent, to become a better spouse, and to build a stronger family. And look, there's never been a better time and a more important time than right now to take back your family. You can define what your family stands for, or the world is going to do it for you. And the world needs strong families now more than ever. And it starts right here with your family.
Welcome to this week on the Family Brand podcast. I have with me Mick Naples, and he wrote a cool book called Walking with Grizzlies, and I'm really excited. This is going to be a good episode. It's a Father's Day episode, so thank you, Mick, for being on the podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So Mick reached out earlier this week, actually, and I said, let's record this like right now, and he was so accommodating to schedule it quickly. Because what we're going to talk about is like, this has got to be, the Father's Day episode, because it is looking at the father-son relationship in a different way than I think that we're used to. And we'll get into that. But Mick, tell us a little bit about who is Mick Naples.
Thanks again, Melissa, for having me. And basically, I lived in Northeast Ohio my whole life. I'm a Christian. We planted a church. I've spent some time at seminary, and I've since left the pastoral ministry, but I certainly, haven't left the faith by any means. That's a podcast in itself, probably multiple podcasts, but here with my family, my wife, my son, he's just about a year and a half. And then my wife, as I mentioned to you when we were scheduling, is actually due on the 14th. So it's kind of funny, actually, not to camp here on tertiary facts for too long, but my wife's sisters, 3 of them are pregnant all at the same time. One was due a week
Wow.
ahead of my wife, and one is due a week after my wife. So one actually gave birth early this morning. And again, my wife, my poor wife is about ready to burst. So here with my family, and I wrote the book, as I was telling you just a few minutes ago, and I think that's what we're going to get into here.
Awesome. How fun to have that experience with her sisters.
Oh, it's cool.
Okay, tell us about Walking with Grizzlies. What was the inspiration for this book, and kind of what?
Sure. No, I
About today.
appreciate the question, and we can kind of steer this conversation wherever you'd like to go. But basically, Walking with Grizzlies is lessons for those with dads. And it's about all the lessons that I learned in the wake of my own dad's death. And it's interesting that my dad and I weren't particularly close while he was alive. I mean, in some measure we were, but in many, many others we weren't. And I just didn't realize what I had until he had passed, until he was gone. And I know that's cliche. Like, we all have these shoulda, coulda, woulda stories, but I just kind of felt that I had to do something with this, or it was just kind of wasted. And I mean, I do like writing as well, so it just seemed natural to put it in book form and hopefully honor his memory in some way, if someone can benefit from learning from my mistakes.
Tell me a little bit about your dad.
Yeah. So my dad, and this is kind of how I start the book off, and that's the title for the book, by the way, Walking with Grizzly. So my dad had this saying, and he kind of like growled it. I'm not even going to try to imitate it, but he said, if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. And like, it was just this, like, it brings a smile to my face, wishing that my son could hear him say that, because he was just one of a kind. And he lived totally for his family. My dad's wardrobe you could probably pay for with the cash in your pocket. I mean, he wore the same ripped up shirt, sweatpants with holes in them, $27 Walmart tennis shoes. My mom eventually made him get a new truck, but he drove a 1979 Ford F-150 for 22 years, put
Wow.
317,000 miles on it. It had holes in the floor. Actually, when I was cleaning my basement, I came across a picture of his old truck, and that was a treasure because I don't know if there's any other pictures around, but it looked like a Dalmatian because anytime a rust spot popped up, he would just sand it down and hit it with some spray paint. I mean, this thing was just it gets me from A to B, and I'm sure some of your listeners can relate to that kind of old school mentality, but he was always there. And interestingly, during high school, my phone number actually was circulated quite widely through the student body because my dad was this guy that people would call the prank phone call because he just had no filter. He would say what was on his mind, and that only got worse as he got older. And I mean, he would just bring people to tears. They'd call him to mess with them, and he'd go into all these rants and different things. But it grew into something more than that. My friends would sometimes they would start coming over not to hang out with me, but to hang out with my dad. I have always been kind of a wimp, not staying up too late and whatnot. And I'd get up and come out and get a drink or something, and there'd be a friend or two of mine. I mean, my age, high school guys, college guys, sitting on the couch at 2 a.m. talking to my old man, and it was just the strangest thing. I mean, looking back now, it's not so strange, but I can tell you at that time, it was actually frustrating. I don't know why, and I reflect on this a little bit in the book. I don't know why. The analogy I think I used is a kindergartner who's got this massive pile of toys that he's hoarding, far more than he could play with himself, but he nonetheless doesn't want to share it with anyone. I was just kind of a curmudgeon. I don't know, but he was a legend. He really was.
And did you lose him unexpectedly?
Yeah, that's another interesting question. So yes and no. So my dad did not take care of himself, and 7 months or so before he died, he passed out at a gas station. His sugar was way off, and he had to be picked up by ambulance and taken to the hospital. And I mean, he never came home again after that. So for 7 months, he would
Wow.
bounce back and forth between nursing homes, rehab centers, and the hospital. So basically, he would get discharged from the hospital, but he'd been sedentary so long that he would need to go to rehab. And so he would do that and make some measure of progress, but then he would have some sort of episode that would see him sent back to the hospital. And we would just go through this vicious cycle until, I mean, so in that sense, he was not in good health, but it was unexpected when I got the call that he had died. Yeah, I certainly wasn't expecting that.
How old were you when you
So dad
lost
died
him?
in 2019. So that would have put, what's that, 7 years ago now. So I was 31. And, it's interesting too, like at 31, and I'm not saying I recommend this necessarily, but I was still lit. My dad and I were living together. So really interesting time for me. I don't know that it's prudent that we camp here for a ton of time, but lots of changes happening. So I was one of those kids who got along with my parents. So I wasn't in a hurry to get out and go spread my wings and do all these things. There were some good things and some bad things about that I look back on now, but very thankful. But I lived with my dad up until the time that he left for 31 years, basically. And right before this time, my parents had actually got a divorce. They had split up after 30 years. And so my dad and I still we moved out of the house I grew up in, but we moved in together to another house. And then this all happened. All these things kind of happened in a very short period of time, sort of rapid fire. And I'm not sure that I processed all of that as it was happening.
That's what I was gonna say. That sounds like that was a lot to process
It
at
was,
that.
and since there's since this is about family in general, I really wrestled with a lot of things. How was I to view my parents in this? What's my relationship going to be like with my mom? I know I was angry about things, but I actually, and this, I came to this on my own. It did take some time, but I was reading through Martin Luther's Shorter Catechism, and he's got a fantastic quote in there that I'm just going to paraphrase, but he basically said that your parents' shortcomings do not negate the honor that you owe them. I was just like,
Mm.
wow, that's so good. That's so true. I mean, because, and this is in the book as well, we've all got these long lists about the things that we look at our parents and say, I'm never going to be like that with my kids, right?
Yeah.
Those lists are easy to make, and oftentimes they really overshadow the lists of, hey, you're like your father or you're like your mother in this regard. And that's a really good thing. I remember that for a time, I would get really upset when my mom would say something like, you're just like your father. It's like, man, that's frustrating to me. But I came to realize that some of my best qualities are actually where I'm like him, and some of my worst qualities are where I could stand to be more like him. So it's just funny how life happens, death happens, and you're awakened to all of these things. And again, not to be cliche, but oftentimes it's too late to apply any of it.
I really love what you said by Martin Luther. And I think that that's so true. Like that is the nature of being human, is that we all have these things that, are our faults, or that our kids can look, like you're saying, and be like, I will never do that. I will never be like that. But I think that I don't know. I just think today, in today's world, I see more and more people choosing to distance themselves from their parents, maybe because of those things. And sometimes, distance is good. There needs to be some boundaries. But having this conversation with you really has me thinking, like, what is the role of maintaining those relationships? Is it the dad's job to be working on those relationships, or do the children, or the son and the father, or the daughter and the father, carry equal responsibility in maintaining and strengthening, building relationships as time goes on?
Well, our thoughts have led us to the same question, because as I've been thinking about this, particularly this week, and trying to bridge that gap, right? So the book was written not for fathers, but for children, for sons and daughters, for anybody with a dad. And that's kind of a niche area, right? You can go and you can find podcasts and you can find books about fatherhood and motherhood and all these different things, but
Yeah.
no one's really talking about, well, hey, what about the other side of this equation? And so as I was thinking about this, I'm just like, man, first off, I pray that my son treats me better than I treated my dad, for one thing. But kind of to your point, it's how can we cultivate this? So perfect example in this. So one of my best friends, his dad passed last week. I went to the funeral, and
Man.
he had read and wrote the most amazing eulogy. And our dads were actually born the same year. They actually knew each other in a loose measure. But they were cut from the same cloth. I could have read the eulogy. I couldn't have written it as well as he did. Like I said, it was beautiful. I asked him for a copy, but I could have read the same thing, applying it to my dad. And it was, so much of it was, how thankful he was, but not just in the wake of his dad's death, but how it was clear that he was aware of all of these things, how good his dad was to him, how good he had it, and all of these things. And I just sat there thinking, why is it that one person realizes all of these things when they ought to? And why is it that another person, namely me, and probably many others as well, just doesn't come to see these things? Is it a parental responsibility to cultivate this environment wherein those sentiments flourish? And then I thought, well, no, I certainly can't point the finger at my dad here. It's not his fault. So I'm not sure I've come to an answer on that yet. So I pose the question to you, to your listeners, to anybody out there. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, to me, I think that I don't know if this is true or not, but to me, sometimes I think that maybe too much pressure is put on the parents to be like the one who's seeking out the relationship and trying to improve the relationship. But having scheduled this with you, it does have me thinking like, wait, is that fair? And is that or what are the things that I could be doing to continue to improve and grow that relationship? And as I was looking over your book, I have not had the opportunity to read the full book, but I'm looking
This all came
over.
together pretty quickly. I won't hold it against you.
Yeah, Mick and I just connected like 2 days ago, so it was kind of quick. But as I was looking at kind of the chapters, I'm like, I love there's 10 headings of like things that children can do to strengthen that relationship with their dad. And some of them are like easier things, some of them are harder things, but I really appreciate the opportunity of looking at them and being like, kind of weighing myself and being like, yeah, how am I doing in these areas? So maybe we could talk about a couple of
Sure.
them.
Just throw them out. I'd be happy to dive deeper on any of them.
Okay. Number 1, see the value in your dad.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the opening chapters, and it goes back to what I was saying about my friends coming over.
Yeah.
If you look around and everybody around you is behaving a certain way or seeing value in something in particular, and you're not, like, it really ought to be an impetus for you to stop and question what you're missing. Now, not always, right? So don't hopefully you don't have to. I don't have to qualify everything I'm saying here, right? Like if you look out at the general sentiment of the culture of our day, like the masses have most stuff wrong, right? It's not universal in that sense, but when you hone in and look at where I was at, particularly in this context relationally, it's like all these people want to spend time with my dad, and I couldn't be bothered with anything having to do with him. What am I missing? So it's seeing that and asking yourself that question. It's a deliberate thought process, and we really have to be deliberate with it. You're not just gonna probably randomly sit down and think about these things. I mean, I lived with my dad for the better part of 40 years, and apparently that wasn't enough time.
I was watching this movie with my oldest on Sunday. He was like, "Hey, let's watch this movie," and he was like, "This is one of my favorite movies," and it's I can't remember exactly how he positioned the movie, but it's like this experimental movie. It's called The Tree of Life.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've ever seen this, but
I've not.
It has Brad Pitt in it, but it's very interesting how the whole movie is done. But there is a father character in this movie, and the whole story kind of follows his relationship with his sons. And it's interesting that this takes place in like the 1950s, and sometimes the father is very, I would say, kind of hard on the sons. And this is leading into this this other point in your book. Consider the love your dad has for you. But he's kind of like hard on his sons, I would say, or at least that's how I interpret his behavior in the movie. And as the movie goes on and the son's like reflecting back on his life, like not to say that he treated his son in the right way all the time, but he's able to start seeing like, oh, I think that some of the things that my dad did was his attempt at showing like love for me, because he wanted me to be successful, or he wanted me to know how to do certain things that he felt were important. And so he tried to enforce that in a way that maybe the son didn't understand in the moment, or definitely didn't occur to him as love. But looking back, he was like, oh, I see how those were ways that my dad was trying to show me his love and his care. And I feel like maybe that happens with dads sometimes, is that their actions can be misinterpreted.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I look back, my dad was a mechanic by trade, and I just remember, he'd ask me to come out and hold the flashlight for him or something, or man the brake pedal while he's underneath the hood. And it's just like, you're as a kid, you're frustrated. It's like, I've got all these things to do, and looking back, it's like I didn't really have anything to do.
Totally.
And it's just, a friend of mine once said to me, I'd be sitting around and my dad was still alive at this time actually. And I'd say, I wish I would have learned more from my dad, about mechanics and cars and those types of things. And he would say to me, well, it's not too late. And then it was too late, right? But I think to your point, you these scenarios, come hold the flashlight, come do this with me, come run this errand with me. It's not all just simple logistics, but we bond in proximity, right? It's a necessary component, and that's how relationships are cultivated. You think about the people you graduated with, or go through a college course with, or that you work with, or that you go through some crucible experience with. Why are you knit together with these people? It's because you've gone through the same things and you've gone through them together. So, holding a flashlight for 20 minutes isn't the same as any of those things I've just rattled off, but it is a certain microcosm for doing life together is important. As I was flipping through your podcast, I think I saw one of the episodes, as the title implied, basically still dating your spouse and being with your spouse even during busy seasons. And, these things, relationships don't grow and they're not maintained on autopilot, right?
Yeah.
And that is a huge component when we think about the father-child relationship, because I think we could all attest to the fact that right around the time that we start driving, that autopilot kind of gets shifted anyway, because we're
Mm.
no longer totally dependent on our parents anymore. They're the ones that pick you up. They're the ones that feed you, that take you here, that do this. So they're just always there by default. But we all hit a place in life where that no longer becomes the default setting, thereby creating this kind of environment wherein if you don't put energy into this, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah, that's something that we say often in Family Brand is, building things by design, not by default.
That's
And
good.
again, I don't think that I've ever thought of it. Usually I'm thinking about it as my own little family, like in, my home with my kids. But I really appreciate this opportunity to look at, flipping that and being like, okay, that's still my dad or my mom. Am I building that relationship by design, or is that happening by default, just when we happen to,
Right.
see each other at Christmas or whatever it is?
And again, I'm not entirely certain of why all of these things happen, why the shift in mindset, but I think life experience is a big part of it. Like now, as a father myself, I've come to so many of these realizations. And I wasn't a father when I started writing the book. Actually, one of the chapters I talk about my wife being pregnant. So it was right in that time of life. And of course, when my dad died, I didn't even know my wife. So all of this happened before then. But if there's one thing I wish I could have shared with my dad, it's fatherhood. I just it's I think that probably would have changed perspective on a lot of things. And you do come to realize that you just I guess you come to realize that you're just an idiot. That you don't have things figured out, that you don't know the things that you think you know. And so I'll tie in a couple kind of caveat here and paired with a story. So I've heard it said that I don't know if it was every son, but we can go with every child, whatever it is, kind of goes through three stages with their father, right? They idolize them, they demonize them, and then they humanize them. And I
Mm.
just thought, man, categorically, that's like firing on all cylinders here. When we're kids, we're walking around having arguments. Well, my dad could beat your dad in a fight, and and all these things. And then you go through where I spent most of my life. I'm getting angry at my mom for comparing me to my dad. And then on the other side of that, you humanize him, and you're just like, whoa, I understand some measure of what the man was thinking and feeling at this point. I remember and this was no small rift between my parents, but we moved into a house when I was in sixth grade into a nicer suburb here in Northeast Ohio. And my parents were able to get the house right before it went to sheriff's auction. Kind of a long story there, but they were able to swoop in and get this house at a great price, but it didn't have a yard, right? And so we went the better part of a decade without any grass. I would be out there on the lawnmower mowing down weeds. We'd be riding four wheelers in the front yard, and it was not the picture that you're going for with the white picket fence and all that kind of stuff. And I remember just thinking like, why doesn't this guy just execute? Why doesn't he just do this? Why doesn't he just take care of this? And then on the other side of that, you start your own family, you buy your own home with all the projects and all the costs and all of these things, and you just come to the realization that it's just not that simple. There are
Yeah.
so many things weighing upon you. It's just not that simple. And as a young kid, you're just ignorant to all of those things.
There's one thing you said I thought was really thought provoking. Just on your website, it says, if you are a parent, the way you treat the man who raised you is the curriculum your kids are absorbing, which is another theme that we like to talk about more as caught than taught. But again, I've never thought about it in this way, that that's something that they're learning by watching us as well.
Yeah, it totally is. There's a section at the end of the book where I actually I'll just read this quick excerpt from it, because I'll be honest with you, that curriculum language, it's beautiful, but that's an AI paraphrase that helped me make the website. AI did not help me write the book. I will throw that out there as an appreciator of the arts. I don't want to publish anything written by AI and say it's mine. So it helped me write the copy for the website, not the book. So just read this very quickly. In the conclusion here, it says, remember, embody, and then inject the same relational attributes that we spent so much time talking about here into the relationships you have with those closest to you. Obviously, your dad while he's still with you, but also and especially your children. Insofar as you remember your dad and carry on the good things that you learned from him, you perpetuate his legacy and ensure that he is thereby never forgotten, even long after the wind and rain have erased the name from his gravestone. I think that's another oft ignored sentiment today is legacy. Where is this thing going? What is going to exist? Do we have a vision of what the future is holding, of something that we're building here, right? So that seems to be in line with everything that you're saying, and I really appreciate that goal of you guys and your mission there. And I would say if I had to pick an overarching theme of the book, something to really pull away, it's of putting people in a position to avoid the regret. I mean, there are things that eat me up, and the book is not a sob story. I think I'm a decent writer. I think it's accessible and as light as it can be, but regret is heavy to carry. And the whole concept of wisdom, right, is that if we listen, we won't have to carry that regret, right? It's better to learn from someone else's stupidity than your own,
Yeah.
to paraphrase. And I'll tell you, the day that my dad died, I remember I was sitting in my office. I was working as a dean of students at an intermediate school at the time, and I had called the nurse's station just to kind of check in on him and see how he was doing. He said, "Oh, fine, everything's fine." And the nurse asked, "Would you like to speak with him?" And I said, "No, I will talk with him later when I come." And several hours later, I don't think I had made it home. I got a call from the hospital. Hey, I don't remember exactly what they said, but your dad's unresponsive. Might have been the language. And the medical professionals, they're trained. They're not going to tell you your loved one died on the phone. And I'll be honest, I didn't connect those dots, right? I didn't connect those dots. So, but I'm just thinking, I'm just like, man, this is probably not a good thing. And you get to they got to the hospital, and I'm kind of wandering around, and I wander into his room, and I saw him, laying there, and he was gone. And the nurse came up to me mortified. Obviously, she would have liked to have stopped me before I walked into the room and saw that. But it's just a highlight of one of those things wherein, oh, I'll talk to him later,
Hmm.
and there's not necessarily a later, right? And the real kicker is, and I think that anybody could probably say this about their dad if they have a decent relationship with their dad. My dad would have sat down and talked with me about anything for an undisclosed, unlimited amount of time. I would always have his ear, and it's something I just took for granted. That's a huge that's a huge regret. And it was something I would aim to caution people against. Write your dad a letter. The book has reflection questions and practical steps at the end of every chapter to kind of apply some of these things that we identify as we make the journey through the book. Write a letter. Like if you can't put it into words, and here's the other thing, and this is we're probably getting close to time here to dive into the philosophy of this, but you talk to anybody, right? And they say, what's the cliche is, well, I don't talk about people close to me with religion, and I don't talk to them about politics. And I say, well, shouldn't you talk about the most important things with the people who are most important to you? Not that politics is necessarily the most important thing in the world, but the whole concept of politics is derived from principles. We vote and we lean the way that we do because of a platform allegedly based on principles. So those things are important to discuss. And our dads would probably listen to us talk about anything. I know mine would have, and I didn't talk to him. One of the last conversations I had with my dad, it's one of those things where I try to say the right thing. I usually say the right thing, but when I don't, I need the jaws of life to pull my foot out of my mouth. My dad's sitting there in a hospital bed in a rehab nursing home, and he's telling me about all this great progress he's made. And for whatever reason, I just felt that the response at that point in time was telling him not to get too excited because there's still all this other stuff he has to do. And he just looked at me and he said, "Why do you have to be so damn negative?" And, at the time, it was just your father's son kind of banter. But looking back, it's like that was one of the last conversations I ever had with my dad. Certainly one of the most memorable. And, uh, you know, why? Why?
I like the point that you raised here, though. It's like not like these relationships that are most meaningful to us, they're not always easy. Like there's challenges and there's hard conversations, and that doesn't mean they're not worth having and not worth pursuing because they are our life's most meaningful relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the biggest kicker is, and the most important things, right? As a Christian, there is nothing more important to talk about than the condition of one's soul, right? The Bible teaches that everybody is going to spend eternity in heaven or hell based upon what they do with Jesus Christ. And most people, if you start bringing those types of things up, they'll call you a Bible thumper, they'll turn the other way, they'll ridicule you, whatever. It's like, listen, I could have talked about the most obscure thing in the world. My dad would have sat there and listened to me, a captive audience, and I just didn't take advantage of it. Towards the end of my dad's life, he rekindled a relationship with some of his old high school buddies, which I was happy to see because my dad didn't really have a lot of friends, given his disposition on just about everything.
Oh.
If my dad thought you were an idiot, he didn't wait for you to ask him if you thought he was an idiot. He would just tell you. And, that doesn't always rub people the right way, but a couple of the guys in that group were a Christian, and I got a phone call from one of them after my dad had passed, and he had just expressed to me that he had talked with my dad before he died, and he wanted me to know that he accepted Christ. And I was just like, wow, what a what a phone call this is. And we live in a time of easy believism, for sure. You know, trusting in Christ for eternal life, the forgiveness of your sins, it's a serious thing. Um, but it's also based on a childlike faith, right? So it's one of those things where it gives me great hope to know that a conversation like that happened, and I do have hope that I'll see my dad in heaven one day, but I just don't know with certainty. And there's a sense in which we don't know the condition of anyone's soul around us. I trust, scripture says, believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved. But it's just one of those things where I wasn't there to be a fly on the wall for that conversation, what I would give. But that is the most important thing. One of the concluding lessons is tell your dad about Jesus. You write him a letter. Don't let these important things fall by the wayside.
Thank you. And I'm so glad we got to have this conversation today. And I love leaving every episode with like a small or maybe a big takeaway. Like if you could, give any final words or suggested action out of this episode, what would you tell anyone listening?
Sure. I mean, I think we talked about a lot of good things, Melissa. There's so much that could be said, but I want to go full circle back to just being deliberate. I think that's one of the other themes that run through the book. These things don't just happen, right? You have to design them and also realize, and I think this is tougher for young people, and I don't mean for that to sound condescending, because I was a young knucklehead that thought I knew everything once too. But there's just so many things that are bigger than you. It could be inconvenient for you to do XYZ with your dad, to support him in XYZ, to go do whatever with him. It could take away from something else that you had planned or would like to do, but it's weigh those priorities. Like what's it really going to cost you? And it's realizing this is a man who taught you how to use a spoon, who put a roof over your head, who would step in front of a bus for you right now without thinking, what can you do to support him? And I think that's another theme that's distilled in all of the lessons that I write about in the book.
Awesome. I love that. And I'm going to link in the show notes people to your book.
Thank you.
And then also you have this cool, before we close here, let's talk about this resolution that people can make.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So there's actually a page in the back of the book. It's a resolutions page where you can sign it, you can date it, and it says, resolved. And there's just 4 short resolutions there, kind of summing up all the things that we've discussed that are talked about in the book. And, a mentor of mine, I think we need to be careful with how far we take some of this stuff, but visualization is a real thing. He said, like, hang a picture of you speaking to a crowd or your book or your dream house, whatever, on your refrigerator. You walk by that every single day. Well, I kind of applied that concept to this resolution, frame it, hang it on your, put it on your nightstand, whatever, to really start being deliberate with these things. And at the website, walkingwithgrizzlies.com, you can punch in your email address and I'll send you a free, nice looking PDF about that. And, also forthcoming is the podcast, the Walking with Grizzlies podcast, wherein one of the focal points is going to be the grizzly letters. I want people to send me the stories of their dad, to send me their regrets, their questions, the things that they'd like to see distilled, kind of like you and I have distilled a number of concepts here in our short time. Like, send all that stuff over and, make a reel. We'll throw it in the show, but that's kind of the next thing on my to-do list, and the launch of that is imminent. So I would love to hear from your listeners about any of the things that we've talked about, because obviously I'm very passionate about them, but they're very important, regardless of my passion.
Right. Well, thank you again for being on the Family Brand podcast today. And also thanks for allowing us to sit for a minute and think about our dads and our fathers and how we can improve and strengthen and grow, build improve our relationships with our dads.
Yeah, of course. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, appreciate your time, and just appreciate the trust in putting me before your audience. I know that's not a small thing, but check out the website. My email address is on there, mick@walkingwithgrizzlies.com. If you reach out, I will respond. I like talking about all these things, so I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Take care.
All right, so that is it for today's episode of the Family Brand Podcast.
But before you go, we have something fun for you.
Yeah, like if you've ever wondered, okay, so how's our family culture actually doing? We've got an incredible quiz for that.
Good news, it's quick, it's free, and when you're done with that quiz, we'll even email you this awesome PDF full of practical ways to strengthen your family culture right away.
So all you have to do is go to familybrand.com/quiz, take the quiz, grab the PDF.
We'll see you next time.